If you want to help your swimmers go fast, you have to help them learn how to take their foot off the brake. I'm going to show you everything you need to know about how to improve horizontal alignment in freestyle. We're going to go over what it is, what it looks like, why it matters, the challenge of improving it, my favorite solutions for improving it, how to use those solutions, as well as some practical examples that you can implement today or you can use as inspiration to create your own sets. Let's dive in. So what is horizontal alignment? Well, to go fast in freestyle, swimmers need to move through the water as straight as possible. So the smaller the profile they create, the faster they're going to swim. Just like if you stick your hand out of the window in a car, when you have that smooth profile, the hand's going to slip right through as opposed to being buffered by all that resistance. And creating great horizontal alignment in freestyle can be difficult because of the structure of the body. There's a natural tendency for the legs to sink because the legs are a lot denser than the upper body, especially because the lungs are in the upper body. So one side's going to rise up a little bit, the other side's going to sink down. So now you have a profile, instead of moving straight through the water, we're at an angle, and that's going to create more resistance. To make matters worse, keeping the head low is going to be perceived as a threat by most swimmers, most humans. People like to see where they're going, so swimming with the head down, looking at the bottom of the pool as opposed to looking forward is pretty uncomfortable for a lot of people, especially at first. And we all like oxygen. We need it to survive. So when the head's a little bit lower in the water, that can be perceived as a little bit more of a threat because it's that much further that we have to move the head, move the body to breathe. So again, because of the natural tendencies for the structure of the body, as well as the threat of having the head in the water, horizontal alignment can be difficult to maintain in freestyle. These factors often lead to a situation where the head is up, the hips and legs are down. So instead of moving straight through, now we're moving at an angle. And that means more resistance, a poor profile, and compromised alignment. And the more resistance swimmers create, the more drag they create as they move through the water, that means less speed. They're literally hitting the brakes and slowing them down when they move through the water in anything but optimal alignment. And it doesn't take big changes to lead to big losses in speed. Even subtle distortions in alignment can be impactful. And because swimmers can never swim too fast, every little bit adds up, and we want to do everything we can to help swimmers be as aligned as possible as they move through the water. And so regardless if swimmers are swimming distance events or sprint events, the same positions, the same principles apply. So if we watch this swimmer here, you can see that the head is down, the hips are up at the surface, and even though he's rotating, he's changing his position, he's still maintaining that effective horizontal alignment in the water. The head is in alignment, the hips in alignment, and the legs are up at the surface. This is a great example of maintaining great horizontal alignment as the swimmer moves through the water, keeping everything straight, creating as little resistance as possible so that every time he creates propulsion, it's going to create more speed because he doesn't have his foot on the brakes. So a great example of awesome horizontal alignment. We can see the same thing with sprinters here. You can see that the head is down, the hips are up at the surface, and the feet are up at the surface. And so they're maintaining the same position even though they're swimming really, really, really fast. They're not allowing the body to incline excessively. They're keeping everything in line. The head's down, the hips are up at the surface, and that's going to allow them to move through the water with as little resistance as possible, allowing them to create as much speed as possible with each arm pull and each leg kick. So all the propulsion they create, as much of it as possible, is going to be used to create forward speed as opposed to overcoming unnecessary resistance. Again, it's not complicated. They just need to swim as straight as possible, but just because it's not complicated doesn't mean it's always easy for swimmers to do. And that's the challenge we have, is helping them learn how to do so. So we've alluded to it slightly, but I want to really emphasize, why does it matter to maintain great horizontal alignment? Well, the water is really dense, and it's going to do everything it can to slow swimmers down. That means less speed, and it means more effort. So not only are they going to swim slower, they're going to fatigue faster because they have to overcome more resistance in order to create the same amount of speed. Slower swimming and less efficient swimming is not a recipe for success. And drag gets worse the faster swimmers go. It's not linear, it's exponential. So as swimmers improve and they start swimming faster and faster, any alignment issues that they have are going to become more and more costly because they're going to create exponentially more drag than they would if swimmers were optimally aligned in the water. And so these errors begin to limit performance more and more and more, and so it becomes more and more important to get everything in line and get swimmers moving straight through the water. The other issue too is that swimmers can only become so fit and so powerful. They can only create so much force, they can only create so much propulsion, and they can only develop their metabolic systems to a certain level. So if they want to create more speed, they can build a bigger engine for a while, but at some point, they're going to have to address the other side of the equation, which is reducing the amount of energy they need to achieve a certain speed. So if swimmers can improve their alignment, they're going to reduce their energy demands, which is instantly going to improve their fitness. And so if you can reduce the amount of energy that it takes to move at a certain speed by improving alignment, it's a lot easier to make swimming easier because it literally reduces how much energy is required to hit a certain speed. So improving horizontal alignment is a critical aspect of improving speed and improving performance in freestyle. So what's the challenge in improving horizontal alignment in freestyle? Well, the more we understand the problem, the easier it is to find solutions that are going to be really effective at improving this skill. So alignment mistakes are typically small and they're typically subtle. And so a lot of swimmers will really struggle to feel them. And if they can't feel these changes, they're not aware of them, it's going to be really difficult for them to change them. And simply telling swimmers they're making a mistake isn't always particularly helpful, especially when they can't feel that they're making that mistake. Another big challenge with alignment is that in many cases, we're not adding new movements, we're trying to get rid of unnecessary movements. There's not necessarily a specific movement that swimmers have to try to create. They're trying to not deviate from that ideal position. And so what they don't do matters because if they don't deviate, then they're going to move through the water straight with great alignment. And for these reasons, to create change, we can't necessarily rely on instruction because if they're not aware, they can't feel it, it doesn't really matter what we tell them. So we have to provide them with the opportunity to feel these changes. And once they have awareness, then they have the power and the ability to create change. So with an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish, an understanding of the challenges that are in front of us, it's time to dive into the solutions that are ultimately going to help swimmers go fast. We'll cover my preferred solutions for this skill, and then I'll provide you with a couple sets that show you how to use these strategies. So the first drill that I like to use is called the ball float to X float. So swimmers learn how to feel the support of their lungs, and then they can use that flotation to stay better aligned. So if swimmers aren't using the support of the lungs, they're going to have to compensate in order to create some sort of buoyancy, and that almost always is going to lead to disruptions in alignment. Once they can feel the lungs, they can learn how to lean into the lungs to reduce that tendency for the hips to sink, and that's going to encourage better alignment. Swimmers can also learn how to hold their legs up and create tension in the back of the legs to maintain an aligned position as they move through the water. And by moving the legs, swimmers can also experience different levels of tension. Finally, swimmers learn to manage their position dynamically. By moving back and forth between different positions, they're going to learn control, which is critical because managing alignment in freestyle is an active process where they have to maintain alignment, where there's a lot of other things going on with the arms, with the legs. So here's the exercise in action, and what they're going to do is they're going to get in a ball, they're going to float, and then they're going to expand out, and they're going to try to maintain their position on the surface of the water as well as they can. So they're going to have to lean into their lungs in order to support their hips, and they're going to have to create some tension in their legs in order to establish the heels up at the surface of the water. So they're learning how to maintain and manage an effective horizontal alignment and effective position in the water. So to reiterate what we just saw, it's important that swimmers learn to lean into the water, and it's also important that they learn how to create tension to lift the legs up to the surface. And most importantly, they have to dynamically manage those positions, moving back and forth between the positions and still maintaining a rock-solid alignment on the surface of the water. So the next activity that I like is elevator swim, and that's where swimmers start with the head up high and then progressively lower their head over the course of a 25 when they're swimming freestyle, or they can start low and end up high. And so where the head goes, the body follows, and it has a huge influence on the position of the rest of the body. When you get the head position right, body position tends to follow, and that tends to mean effective horizontal alignment. While it would be easy to tell each swimmer exactly where to put their head, one of the challenges, though, is that there isn't one right position for every swimmer. They have different lung sizes and location, so their buoyancy is going to be a little bit different. There are going to be different leg sizes and location is relevant because different swimmers have different muscular and body fat distribution patterns, and that's going to affect how the legs ride in the water independent of their length. Swimmers are also at different height, which changes everything as well. So we can help swimmers figure out their best position for them by allowing them and encouraging them to explore a range of different head positions, which is going to help them explore a range of different body positions. To help encourage that exploration, change it up. Have them go fast, have them go slow, use different training aids, use as many different variations as possible in order to provide them with as much information as possible to help them figure out what's going to work best for them. So here it is in action. Start with a really high head position, and then gradually lower the head position, and you want to start excessively high and you want to end up excessively low. And you can reverse that starting with a low position and moving to a high position as well. And so the key is to explore a range of positions. And if you watch here, you can see that the hips will gradually come up as the head gets lower and lower. And it's not that lower is better, it's finding the right position that's going to be most effective for each swimmer, and that's what we're really trying to accomplish. So again, as the head position changes, so too will the body position. And when swimmers can learn to manage their head position, they're going to improve their body position. But they have to figure out what is going to be the most effective head position for them that allows them to move through the water with the best alignment. And by using the elevator swim drill, we're having them explore, and the more context we can have them explore, the more likely it is that they'll figure out and be able to feel which position is going to be most effective for them. A powerful strategy that can work with any activity is overspeed. So by swimming really fast, typically with fins, we can help swimmers become more aware of their alignment and help them improve their alignment. So the rationale: drag is subtle and it's hard to feel. And the faster swimmers go, the more drag they're going to create as they move through the water. The more drag they create, the more drag they can feel. That way, less obvious mistakes become more obvious. For instance, if a swimmer is swimming with the head too high, they may not be aware of it, but if they're swimming really fast, they're going to feel all that pressure on the chest, and that's going to allow them to make the change that they need in order to improve their alignment. So whenever you use overspeed, it makes any strategy that you're already using even more effective. So what do? You have swimmers go really fast and pay attention to the drag that they're creating. You can use the drills. You can even use added resistance on top of it. And the goal is to build awareness over time. If they can learn to be more aware of what they're feeling as they move through the water, if they become more aware of the resistance they're creating as they move through the water on different aspects of their body, then they can start to make those changes, and they can make those subtle changes that they otherwise wouldn't be able to feel. And those little changes are going to add up to big improvements in speed. The next strategy is using t-shirts and weight belts. And as we've discussed so far, a big challenge in improving alignment is the issue of feel. And so we have to use strategies that help swimmers better feel how they're moving through the water and how much resistance they're creating as they move through the water. So by using t-shirts and weight belts, we're pulling swimmers out of position where they have to work harder to maintain position, or we're creating more drag over certain areas of the body, and that's going to further challenge swimmers to overcome that drag. And then when we take the challenge away, it's going to be easier to be successful. They'll feel themselves slipping through the water, and that contrast, again, helps them become more aware of the drag that they're creating, both with the added gear and without the added gear. And just like with overspeed, just like with the ball float, just like with elevator swim, more awareness means more opportunity to change. And if we change the input, we change the sensory information that they're experiencing, that's going to change the output, that's going to change what they can do, how they can execute their swimming. What's important is not just to have swimmers swim with the added challenge. You want to ask for performance. You want speed, stroke count, stroke rate combinations in order to force swimmers to explore different ways to be successful. If you ask them to perform at higher and higher levels with the gear, they're going to have to find better and better solutions in order to accomplish those goals and achieve those objectives. You can use it with drills, you can use it with fatigue, anything goes. You just want swimmers focused on maintaining their alignment as best as possible in spite of the added challenge. And then when the gear comes off, they really want to lock in and make sure they're executing at a really high level. Finally, you always want to ask for performance. Regardless of the skill you're trying to improve, asking for performance is a key aspect of driving better skills. You can use stroke counts, you can use stroke rates, you can use speed, and you can use a combination of all three. The key is you're asking for better performances and you're encouraging swimmers to explore how to achieve those performances via better skills. In the context of improving horizontal alignment, you can do it in one of two ways. You can use the sensory activities and then perform with regular freestyle. So for instance, you do 425s elevator swim. That helps them get a feel for their position. And then you go 425s freestyle, minimize stroke count and time. Of course, you can do it in any sort of set, any sort of context. The second strategy is perform during the sensory activities and then perform during freestyle as well. So 425s freestyle with fins, minimize stroke count and time, and they're going to do ball float to X float before each 25, so they get a feel for what they're doing, and then they're going to try to be fast and efficient, maintaining great alignment during those 25s. And then in the second 425s, then they're just going to do it straight up freestyle, again, minimizing stroke count and time to try to perform. So two options, they both work really well. It just depends on what you want to achieve. Regardless, ask for performance and swimmers will find a way to perform. And when you're doing so in the context of improving horizontal alignment and freestyle, that's the skill that's going to get better. So here's the first set to show some of these solutions in action. They're going to go 4 50s, 25 elevator swim, 25 freestyle. The odds, the elevator goes from low to high. The evens, it goes from high to low. 75 freestyle solid effort, trying to have that same great alignment, and then 25 freestyle strong effort. So this is more of a skill-focused set. There's not a huge amount of pressure on performances or fatigue or speed. Those 425s are going to figure out which position is going to work best for them, and then they're going to perform during those 75s and 25s. And as they go through, they're going to try to go faster on the regular freestyle, and on the 50s, they're going to build each 25, and then they're going to descend the 50s 1 to 4 on the last round. That added change in speed is going to encourage them to swim differently. They'll get a little bit more sensory information, and they can figure out a better way to execute with great head position. And lastly, before each repetition, they're going to go 5 times ball float to X float, so they get a feel for how to maintain that position in the water, how to use their lungs, use their legs to stay aligned, and then they'll try to carry those skills over into each of the swims. So a great way to develop skills while keeping them moving a little bit. This set is a little bit more of an endurance focus, so they're going to go 425s, odds elevator swim with a weight belt. They're going to descend those across the rounds, and then the evens are freestyle with a weight belt, minimize stroke count and time. So they'll do that before each round, and then they'll do some hundreds. They're going to descend at the same stroke count. They're going to drop a rep and go faster each round. So what we're trying to accomplish here is the weight belt is going to pull swimmers out of alignment, and that's going to magnify what they feel during the elevator swim, and then they've got to execute during the regular freestyle and make sure that they still stay in great alignment. And then they're going to stay long, try to create some speed on those hundreds, and try to get better as they go. So they're experiencing a pretty big challenge on those 25s, and then on the hundreds, they're going to try to execute, and they're going to try to perform at higher and higher levels, staying long, staying efficient, and maintaining better alignment as they do so in order to create more speed. So we're using drills, we're using the resistance strategy, and then we're also challenging swimmers to perform in this set. If you don't have weight belts, you can use t-shirts, you can use shorts, something that's going to challenge their position in the water and will also create more drag on their body as they move through the water. Last set is more of a speed set, and we're going to use the overspeed strategy here. So before each swim, they're going to perform some ball float to X float repetitions, and that's going to help them get locked in with their alignment. And they're going to go 2 rounds through this. They'll go 325s with fins as fast as possible at 1.0 seconds per cycle. You can use stroke counts as well. The idea is to create some speed and length. Then they're going to go 25 freestyle without fins. And then they're going to go 2 and 1, and then 1 and 1, but they're going to drop the rate, and they're going to go 2 rounds through this. So they're going to be swimming pretty fast here, and that's going to allow them to feel more resistance. And by doing the exercise before each one, they're going to have a feel for how to maintain great alignment, and they're going to try to create as much speed as they can without picking up the stroke rate. And the better aligned they are, the more speed they're going to be able to create. And by performing the drill before each swim, they're going to have more awareness of what they need to do during those faster repetitions. So horizontal alignment is a key skill in freestyle. The more swimmers can move straight through the water, the less resistance they'll create, and that means more speed for less effort. The challenge with improving alignment is that it's not necessarily a concrete skill that swimmers have to execute, and it can be difficult for them to feel. So we have to provide them with strategies that allow them to feel how much resistance they're creating as a result of less than optimal alignment, and then challenge them to change that position in order to create performances and improve their skills. And when they can do that, they're going to improve their alignment, and that means they're going to swim faster. If you want more information like this, be sure to subscribe, and I'll continue to bring you the content that helps you help your swimmers get faster. More than any other stroke, breaststroke creates a ton of resistance, and that's why breaststroke is the slowest stroke. Well, that means there's a lot of opportunities to make mistakes and swim slower. There's also a lot of opportunity to make improvements in alignment, and that's going to result in a lot more speed. So if your swimmers are trying to improve their breaststroke, rather than just trying to pull or kick more effectively, they need to focus on their alignment if they want to improve their breaststroke speed. And just like with every skill, it's going to take a systematic approach if you really want to create improvement and you want to see progress. You can't just do 1 or 2 drills. You have to understand what's happening, why it's important, the key skills involved, what are the challenges in helping swimmers improve that skill, and then we're using several different solutions in combination in order to create the change that you're looking for. When you want to create a change, you have to know what you're trying to accomplish, the strategies you're going to use, and then build that into your training. I'm going to show you how to make it happen to improve horizontal alignment in breaststroke. So why does horizontal alignment matter in breaststroke? Well, breaststroke creates more resistance than any other stroke. That's why it's the slowest of all the strokes, and that's why it requires more energy than any other stroke. Resistance slows breaststrokers down, and it makes breaststroke a lot harder. Well, that's obviously not good news. The flip side is because the resistance is so high, if you can help swimmers eliminate even just a little bit of their resistance by improving their alignment, they're going to go a lot faster. And it's going to be free speed in the sense that it actually makes swimming easier rather than harder. If they were to learn how to get a more powerful pull, that will improve their speed, but it requires more energy in order to execute that pull. If you can help them be more streamlined, more aligned, well, now it's going to be actually easier to swim breaststroke, so they're going to be faster and they're going to be able to hold it together more because they're not going to use as much energy. That's a double win. The better their alignment is, the less resistance they have, the more speed they're going to have, and the more endurance they're going to have, again, because swimming is easier. So if swimmers can improve this skill, there's a lot of benefits in terms of going faster in competition. So what is it? Well, breaststrokers need to establish a horizontal position in between each stroke cycle. They want to be level, flat on the surface. They want to be as straight as possible. Just like when you put your hand out the window, if you have it pointed straight up, there's going to be a ton of resistance. If you have it straight, there's going to be a lot less resistance. And the same principle applies here with breaststrokers. They want to get straight after each stroke cycle. They need to return to that position and establish that position in between each stroke. Then they want to deviate from that position as little as possible. So they don't want the hips to drop low. They don't want to come up super high. The hips have to stay in line. They want to try to minimize the impact of the breath on their body position. Now, obviously, they have to breathe, and there's going to be some impact, but the smaller it is, the less resistance they'll create, the more effective and the faster they're going to go. Now, to recover the kick, they're going to have to bring their legs forward. The longer they can wait to do that, the less resistance they're going to create as well, because when they do that, it's necessary to get a great kick, but it's kind of like putting on the brakes. So if they do it slow and they do it for a long period of time, well, they're creating more resistance than they have to. And the last key aspect is they have to, no matter how fast they're going, no matter what their stroke rate is, they got to get back into alignment. They got to get straight in between each stroke cycles. Even when swimmers are sprinting at the highest level, they're getting back into alignment. Even if it's only for a tenth of a second, they're doing it between each stroke cycle. So we've gone over why it matters and what it is. Let's check out what it looks like. So we'll watch two swimmers here, one swimming over 200 meters and one swimming over 100 meters. So you can see how the same principles apply, even though the rates are going to be dramatically different. So if we watch this swimmer here, you can see he's taking his pull, and look how long those legs are. He's not rushing the kick up. He's keeping everything in his line as long as possible. And second thing too, when he takes this breath here, watch how the hips don't drop. Everything stays right up at the surface, even when he comes up with the body. So his leg comes fast here, and then he gets out of that position. And again, now he's back into alignment after the stroke. So he's not extending the length of the breath. When he does breathe, he keeps the hips up. And then the last aspect of it is when he recovers the legs, he waits to do so and then does so really fast in order to minimize the time that he's in those positions. So the key thing here is that he's going to get back into alignment right here in between each stroke cycle. So those are the really important aspects of it, is minimizing any loss of alignment and then reestablishing and getting back into this great alignment in between each stroke to ensure that he keeps his resistance he's creating as low as possible. Now let's check out the same skills in a swimmer over 100 meters. And so right here, you can see she's back into alignment. Her hips are up, her head's down. She's not pausing, she's not gliding at all, but she's finding a way to get back into that position. And then when she breathes there, watch the hips. They don't really drop at all. If anything, they might come up a little bit. And so she's maintaining alignment through the breath as well. Next aspect is, so she's starting to pull. Watch how long it takes for her to recover the legs. She's minimizing the amount of time she does that, and she's minimizing the resistance she creates when she creates that setup and recovers the legs. So again, gets back into alignment there. Everything's straight on the surface. Even at a really high stroke rate, you can see her stroke rate's high, but she's getting back into it really fast. She's not losing position of the hips when she breathes, and she's recovering the legs fast to minimize the impact of the leg recovery on the resistance that she creates. So even at really high stroke rates, probably almost twice as what the previous swimmer was using, she's able to demonstrate and establish those same skills. So the more swimmers can maintain their alignment and the more they can get back into alignment with each stroke, the more effective they're going to be at minimizing resistance and creating a lot of speed. So what makes improving alignment so difficult? The biggest idea is that it's about subtraction rather than addition. You're trying to remove unnecessary movements as opposed to add necessary or better movements. And so while creating propulsion is about more Minimizing resistance is about less. It's about what not to do. And that's generally not how we think about movement. It's always a goal-oriented thing where we're trying to do something. In this case, we're trying to get rid of things. Alignment's also subtle. Small changes can make a big difference. A small change in hip position can make a big difference. A small change in the breath can make a big difference. And a lot of times, they're really small. And it's something that you as a coach can't even necessarily see. But swimmers have to learn how to feel it. And if they can feel it, then they can change it. They can influence it. The third challenge is that alignment is individual. The skill, the principle is always going to be the same, but different swimmers are going to have to find slightly different solutions. If swimmers have different limb lengths, if they have different limb masses, if they have different distribution of the mass, they have different sizes of the lungs, they float differently, these are all factors that are going to influence, perhaps subtly but significantly, how swimmers move through the water and what they have to do to optimally manage their alignment to minimize their resistance. So while the principles apply equally to all swimmers, the particular solutions may not apply in the same exact way. And so swimmers are going to have to find those solutions, and you can't necessarily know exactly what they are ahead of time. So that's another big challenge that we have to overcome if we want to help swimmers improve their alignment. So let's talk solutions. We're going to have to overcome the challenges that we just discussed. Swimmers are going to have to think about what to not do, what to get rid of. They're going to have to become aware of the subtlety, and they're going to have to figure out individually appropriate solutions. In order to do that, we can't just add a couple drills. We have to take a systematic approach. We got to think about what we have to help swimmers feel. We have to challenge them and help them execute those skills under pressure. And then we have to build that into sets that are going to develop their skills and their fitness. A full-scale attack on the skill is what's going to be required. So let's take a look at how to make that happen. The first drill we're going to talk about is ball float to X float. So this is a floating drill, a static drill. The idea here is that swimmers are going to need to learn how to use their lungs, how to leverage their lungs in order to create support in the water and to hold a more horizontal position. They're also going to have to learn how to control their legs in order to lift the legs up at the surface. They have to manage that position while moving the limbs back and forth, and that's going to create a really great challenge that helps swimmers learn how to control their position, how to control their posture, and how to float more effectively. And if they can master those skills, it's going to be a lot easier to manage and alter their position when they're actually moving forward through the water swimming breaststroke. It's a great starting point for individuals at any age. And when they can execute this skill well, it's going to be a lot easier to manage their alignment and manage their position. It's an extremely simple exercise. They're just going to get into a ball, and then they're going to expand out of that ball, and they're trying to maintain their position as effectively as they can on the surface of the water. You can have them move their arms. It doesn't have to be an X. You can go into an I or any other shape you want. The key idea is they have to learn how to lean into the water, create pressure with their lungs, and then create tension in the legs to hold the legs up at the surface. The better they can do this in a static position like this, the easier it's going to be when they're moving forward through the water. Next strategy is what I call the alignment progression. The goal here as we move through the different tasks is to minimize the increase in resistance and to maintain as great alignment as possible. So swimmers are going to start on the surface of the water, just dolphin kicking without breathing. Obviously in that position, they're not going to be creating a lot of resistance. Then they're going to add the pull, so no air breaststroke with fins, and they're going to try to maintain as much of that alignment as they can, still trying to create as little resistance as they can. Then they're going to go up-down breaststroke with fins while they breathe every other stroke. Again, how much resistance can they eliminate? How aligned can they stay throughout the entire 25 or whatever distance you're doing? Then they're going to go breaststroke with fins. So now they add a breath every stroke. Again, can they find a way to maintain great alignment, keep everything in line as much as possible? How close can they get to what they were feeling during the dolphin kick with fins on the surface? Last one, they take the fins off, go regular breaststroke. And again, now they're adding the kick in. Can they still create as much alignment as possible and minimize the increase in resistance even though they're adding the legs? So for swimmers that aren't aware of what they're doing, so we're giving them a great sensory target with that first rep, and then they're trying to maintain that as they add different components of the breaststroke. So it's a real sensory challenge. The goal here is to start with perfect, great alignment when they're doing dolphin kicking. There shouldn't be much resistance that they're creating, and they're trying to minimize increases as they move through that. Really simple in concept, but really effective because it allows them to actually feel these skills and practice executing these skills. So we start here with dolphin kick on the surface, and you can see he's just moving through. There's not going to be a lot of resistance as he goes through. Then he's going to add the pull and still trying to stay as level as possible, trying to keep everything forward without disrupting his alignment. Next, he's going to breathe every other stroke. Again, try to keep everything moving forward, trying to keep as little resistance as possible to maintain as great alignment as possible to keep things as easy as possible. Last one is now going breaststroke with fins, so regular breathing, still trying to keep everything as aligned as possible, keeping resistance as low as possible. And after that, you're just doing regular breaststroke, trying to keep that same great alignment, even though you're now adding the kick in, which is going to create more resistance. The goal is to minimize the amount of resistance that gets added. Because the head has such a strong influence on the hip position, we're going to alter the head position to alter the hip position. And so when we do that, swimmers can start to feel what's happening with the hips and how the head position influences that. Over time, they can start to figure out how do you keep their hips up and how do they keep the hips forward. So that way they create as little resistance as possible to create as much speed as possible. So there's a lot of different options here. You can have swimmers go with their head down. You can have them go with their alternating the head down. So one stroke head down, one stroke regular. You can have them go head up. You can have them go alternating head up, where they go one stroke with their head up and then one stroke normal. You can even have them alternate between no breath and then head up and go back and forth between that. There's a ton of different ways to do this, and they're all effective at helping swimmers learn and figure out and perceive what's happening with the hips when they take that breath and how they can change that and influence that by changing how they breathe. So this is head up breaststroke here, and as you see, his hips are going to be low, and that's exactly what we're looking for, so he can feel and he can understand what happens to the hips when the head's held in an unnaturally high position, or even when the head comes up in an unnaturally high position, even temporarily during that breath. Here we've got no breath breaststroke, and so here he's going to be minimizing the amount that his head comes up, and he's going to keep everything moving forwards, and that's going to have more of a forward effect on the hips. It's not going to push them down quite as much, and swimmers can feel that, become more aware of what happens when the breath is kept really low and how that impacts the hips. With this drill, he's going to breathe every other stroke, and so the impact of the breath becomes more obvious because he's feeling on alternating stroke cycles what happens when the head's higher, what happens when the head's lower, and he can try to minimize the difference between the two to still get a great breath while keeping the hips up in alignment with each stroke cycle. While breaststroke with flutter kick can be used for a lot of different ways, for a lot of different reasons, here we're going to use breaststroke with flutter kick to improve alignment. So when adding a flutter kick, we're going to flatten out the stroke. There's not going to be as much up and down motion, and that means the hips are going to be up higher in the water. They're going to stay there, and they're going to be more stable. So those are all things that we're looking for, especially when swimmers are having trouble with alignment. There's too much up and down motion. So we're going to flatten out the stroke, keep the hips up, and then keep the hips stable in that position that we're looking for, that position of lower resistance with better alignment. And so when swimmers can start to feel a supported hip position, they can start to create it, they can start to influence it, they can start to change it. They can start to feel what it's like to just kind of slide through the water with everything riding right at the surface, and they can figure out how to make that happen. Once they can feel it by using the flutter kick, they can start to try to recreate that when they add a breaststroke kick back in. So here we've got breaststroke and flutter kick, and relative to regular breaststroke, his hips are going to stay up, they're going to stay stable, they're going to stay in the same basic position as he moves through the water, which is what we're really looking for, which is what we're really trying to accomplish. So the more he can do that, the more effective he's going to be at creating great alignment and maintaining that alignment, and then he just has to try to make it happen during regular breaststroke. Next up is training aids. The goal here is to use training aids to help create more awareness of alignment and how much resistance is being created with any activity. As we mentioned before, alignment is definitely a feel skill. Swimmers have to be able to feel the resistance they're creating over their body in order to change that, in order to influence it. They don't realize how their position or their posture is influencing how much resistance they create. They're not going to be able to change it. They're not going to be able to feel it. And there are 3 different ways I like to use training aids to help facilitate this outcome. First is overspeed. So if they're going faster, that means they're going to create more drag, which means they can feel the resistance. Great way to do that is fins. You can get a lot of repetitions in, and especially with breaststroke, you can go way faster than they normally would. That allows them to feel the resistance, and then they can start to eliminate it. Clothing is also really effective as well. It exaggerates the resistance because of either a t-shirt or shorts or whatever, and they can feel that as they move through the water. Even better, when they take the clothing off, now they're going to feel the water flowing over their shoulders, flowing over their hips, flowing over their skin, and they're going to be able to really feel what's happening, and they're going to be really able to feel that extra pressure because they're not as aligned as they normally are. Finally, we can add a weight belt as well. So that's going to exaggerate the sinking of the hips. It's also going to help them feel the hips more. And the more they can feel the movement of the hips, the more they can feel the movement of the torso, the better they're going to be able to control that because they're going to have more awareness. And it's going to kind of develop the strength to do that. And it's going to be much easier to make it happen without the weight belt when the weight belt comes off by getting practice and learning how to do it with the weight belt. So these training aids, if swimmers are struggling to feel what they're doing, this can be a really powerful strategy. Now, regardless of what strategy you use, you want to use performance challenges to force them to swim differently. So you can use speed, you can use stroke count, you can use stroke rate, you can use combinations of those, and that's going to challenge them to perform in different ways and try to achieve different performances. So if you have them go faster, it's going to change things. If you have them execute really great alignment at really slow speeds, it's going to change things. Same thing with high stroke counts versus low stroke counts, high stroke rates versus low stroke rates. We saw the differences between those 100 and 200 meter swimmers, and both skills are important to learn, but swimmers have to learn how to manage it in different ways. And by exposing them to all those different things, and then also challenging them to do things more effectively, whether in either breaststroke itself or with any of those drill strategies we talked about, this can really push them to learn. And so you want challenge, and you want challenge in different ways. Novelty, variety, they build skill. And it doesn't have to be a maximal performance challenge. Just asking swimmers to take one less stroke per 25, something like that, can be a really powerful tool. It doesn't have to be take as few strokes as possible each one. Same thing with descending. Just descending 1 to 4 can make a big difference in terms of what swimmers are feeling and experiencing, but it doesn't have to be descend 1 to 4 to all out. Just asking them to change their speed, their stroke count, their stroke rate, or some combination of those can make a big difference in terms of what they learn, what they experience, and as a benefit, it usually leads to better training as well. First set here is more skill-based, and so we're going to go 4 rounds through this. This is a variation of the alignment progression. So they're going to go dolphin kick with fins on the surface, no air breaststroke, up-down breaststroke, breaststroke, and then regular breaststroke without the fins. They're going to go 3 times ball float to X float before each repetition. That way they can really feel their alignment, they can feel the control of their body and how to manage their position on the surface. The odd rounds, they're going to go flutter kick, so it's going to be more stable. The even rounds, it's going to be a little bit more up and down motion. And by using both of those, we can help them become more aware of their alignment and how they're moving through the water. Goal here is to increase the effort each round. It doesn't necessarily have to be super fast, but you're just trying to help them learn how to execute these skills with more and more intensity. So we're changing the head position, we're changing the kick, we're taking fins off, and we're helping them feel how to move through the water with better alignment and how to manage that in different situations. This set is a little bit longer. We're going to go 4 rounds through. They're going to go 4 75s and then a 75. The 4 75s are 25 breathe every other stroke, 25 alternating head up, so 1 stroke regular, 1 stroke head up, and then 25 normal breathing. The odds will use a flutter kick, the evens will use a breaststroke kick. And number 2 and number 4 are faster. So the breaststroke ones are faster than the flutter kick ones. The goal here is to work on multiple different breathing patterns to hold everything together, to manage alignment no matter what. So they're going to get a feel for those up and down positions on the first 2 25s and then try to put it together on the third 25. The flutter kick's going to flatten them out a little bit, and then breaststroke kick, they got to make that happen and maintain the same position. After those 4 75s, they get a chance to put it together with the 75 breaststroke. They'll take 1 less stroke per 25 with that, trying to maintain their alignment as they go through it. So we're alternating flutter and breaststroke kick. We're using different breathing patterns to really challenge their position and manage the hips. And they're using that with different kicks. And then on the final 75, they're trying to be more efficient as they go after they've already done those 4 75s. So we're challenging them with different ways. We're challenging them with different skills to help everything hold together in order to be more effective with maintaining their alignment. Last set is more of a speed set. So they're going to alternate between different breathing patterns. They're going to alternate between flutter kick and regular breaststroke. They're going to go strong efforts on the flutter kick ones. They're going to build the fast on the regular ones. Start with head up, then head down, alternating head up, alternating head down, and then they'll put it together with a 25 fast at the end. Now, there's another twist to this in that in round 1, those first 8 reps are with a t-shirt. Round 2, the first 8 reps are with shorts. And then round 3, there's no equipment that they need to use. So we're challenging them with different head positions, different kicks, different speed requirements, and we're using different resistance, either the t-shirt or the shorts, to help them become more aware of what they're doing and more aware of how they're moving through the water. The more awareness they have, the more effective they're going to be at creating change. And again, this is all done at pretty high speeds. They're really trying to go here. And so they're learning how to execute these skills and feel these skills at high speeds, make it happen then, and that's going to make it a lot more likely that these skills actually show up when they're going fast in competition, which is what it's all about. If swimmers can't stay level in the water when swimming backstroke, they're going to have all sorts of problems when it comes to creating speed and sustaining speed. Establishing an effective position and establishing an effective posture is the foundation for effective backstroke, and if swimmers can't learn these skills, they're always going to struggle. We're going to go over why it's so important. We're going to go over what it is. We'll check out what it looks like in elite swimmers. We'll talk about the challenges of improving it, and then we'll go through solutions and sets that you can use to help swimmers improve this critical skill. Let's check it out. So why does horizontal alignment matter? Creating speed in swimming is a simple equation. It's propulsion minus resistance. So poor alignment is going to lead to a lot more resistance, and more resistance leads to less speed. So if swimmers aren't aligned, they're just going to create a ton of drag, and that's going to slow them down significantly. But worse than that, it's also a lot harder to achieve the same speed when swimmers are swimming with poor horizontal alignment. So not only will they be swimming slower, it's going to be a lot more difficult to hit the same speed. So the more energy they're using, the less endurance they're going to have, and less endurance is also going to lead to slower swimming. So if swimmers can't keep their horizontal alignment in check, it's going to result in harder, slower swimming, which is going to kill their speed, kill their endurance, and that's going to prevent them from swimming as fast as they otherwise could. So what do swimmers need to do in order to create great horizontal alignment? First of all, they need to be level in the water. They want to be flat on the surface, that legs and hips should be up in the surface, and it should be relatively effortless to maintain these positions. Swimmers shouldn't have to work really hard in order to stay aligned because, again, the more energy they have to use in order to do that, the slower they're going to swim because they're not going to have the endurance to sustain whatever speed that they can create. They also want to have a relatively straight, a relatively smooth spine. They want to minimize the speed bumps. If there's lots of arches, there's lots of excessive rounding, and there's abrupt changes in spinal position, that's all going to slow swimmers down because it's almost like the water's hitting a wall and it's like putting on the brakes. Finally, swimmers need to have a stable position. What you see sometimes is backstrokers kind of bouncing up and down. Again, that's going to be a continuous disruption of alignment, and that's not what we want if we want swimmers to swim fast and to maintain really great alignment as they move through the water, minimizing the amount of resistance they create, which allows them to create more speed for less effort. So if we take a look at this snapshot here, we can see that the swimmer is more or less in a straight line from head to toe, and he's going to maintain that position throughout the entire stroke cycle. So you can see that there's not much up and down motion. The spine is relatively straight. There's going to be some rounding in the back, but that almost just creates a smooth contour that allows the water to pass over the body. What we wouldn't want to see is a big arch in the back. We'd rather see a little bit of rounding there than a big arch in order to maintain really great alignment and really great posture. Another important idea here is that the position is relatively stable. You can see his head is not moving up and down. He's not bouncing up and down, and the hips aren't moving up and down. And they're not bouncing up and down. So he's staying level in the water, and he's holding that position throughout the entire stroke cycle. One final thing to look at is that the hips are relatively up at the surface, the legs are up at the surface, and the head, it's not buried down under the surface, but part of it is still under the surface, so he's not having the head up high and he's not having the head down low. He's just kind of going right through the surface of the water. So these are all the key skills that swimmers need to master, the key positions swimmers need to master in order to minimize the amount of resistance they create by having really great alignment as they move through the water. So what are the challenges here? What makes it difficult for swimmers to master this skill? The first challenge is that swimmers are on their back and they don't have any visual feedback as to what they're doing. All they can see is the ceiling of the pool they're swimming in, or if they're swimming outside, they can just see the skies and the clouds. And that makes it more difficult because swimmers don't have anything visually to anchor themselves on to determine whether they're swimming aligned, whether they're swimming straight, or whether they're keeping everything moving in the right direction. And so that can create a big challenge for swimmers because as humans, we're very reliant on our vision. And so when swimmers don't have that visual feedback on their back, it can be more difficult to manage every aspect of the stroke, including their position and their alignment in the water. A second challenge is that in contrast to breaststroke, butterfly, and freestyle, where the head is completely submerged, or more specifically, the face is completely submerged, the face is out of the water in backstroke, but water still passes over the face. And so that makes it difficult and that makes it uncomfortable because swimmers are breathing during that period and water is going to intermittently come across their face. It's going to splash their face, and that can be really uncomfortable. It can be kind of scary for swimmers because that presents a threat to their ability to get oxygen. And as a result, some swimmers will either pick their head up higher out of the water to make sure that they don't have that splashing. Some swimmers you even see that they partially submerge their head and then bring it up to breathe and submerge it again. Also, so that they have a little bit more predictability in terms of when water is going to come across their face, and they're trying to minimize that. That unique dynamic is present only in backstroke, which makes it more difficult for swimmers to manage their alignment on their back. The last challenge, again unique to backstroke, is that the legs will tend to sink, and while they'll also sink in the other strokes, when they sink in backstroke, that causes the back to arch. And when the back arches, because the feet are lower or the hips are lower than the upper body, that's like putting on the brakes. Water will hit that arch in the back and it has a really hard time going around it. And because it just kind of gets stopped, that puts a stop on swimmers' forward progress. They create a ton of resistance and that slows them down. And so that's an added challenge to maintaining alignment as compared to the other strokes. And when swimmers are on their stomach, they can kind of lean into the water to get the hips up. When swimmers lean back into the water, that just reinforces that arch of the back. And so that's the tendency, that's the strategy a lot of swimmers will use. And in many cases, that makes the situation worse. Similarly, if the legs are sinking, swimmers aren't managing that well, or they're not kicking effectively, that further contributes to arching of the back. And that makes it even more difficult to maintain position. So for all these reasons, swimmers can really struggle with maintaining alignment on their back as compared to maintaining alignment on their stomach. When it comes to solutions, we have to find ways to overcome these challenges. We have to have certain strategies that help swimmers feel these key skills, and we have to find ways to help them discover these skills for themselves. And to do so, we're going to use different flotation drills, we're going to use different sensory exploration drills, we're going to use different training aids, and we're going to challenge all of those strategies with performance so that swimmers are encouraged to find more effective ways of executing all these skills. When we take a comprehensive approach, we're a lot more likely to get the results, to get the changes that we're looking for. The first exercise we're going to use is the ball float. And so while it's performed in the stomach, it's still critical for helping swimmers learn to feel how the lungs support them in the water. It's a simple exercise that any swimmer can do, and it lets them feel how the lungs hold them up on the surface. And once swimmers understand how the lungs are their source of flotation, they can learn to manipulate that, they can learn to control it in order to create positions and postures that allow for great alignment, that allow them to move through the water faster and easier. The key skill here is for swimmers to grab a big breath and relax and feel the support of the lungs. Once they can do that, then we can start using that understanding to help create change. So this is a super simple exercise. All swimmers are going to do is grab a big breath and just float. And you can see here, these athletes are doing nothing, but their body is floating at the surface of the water because the lungs are holding them up. And so all swimmers have to do is grab a big breath and they'll be able to learn, they'll be able to feel how the lungs can support them on the surface of the water. And then we can use that understanding, that feeling to create change. With the inner tube and straight back float, we're going to take what swimmers learned during the ball float and apply that to backstroke specific floating positions. So now they can learn to maintain their position, their alignment on their back. So what we're going to do is we're going to have swimmers alternate between these two different positions so that they can learn to maintain position as they move. We're going to start off in a compressed position and then extend out. We'll take a look at the videos in a sec so you have a visual of it. And what they're going to do is they're going to try to maintain position on the water, maintain control as they extend the arms out, as they extend the legs out. And with this type of activity, the goal is not to be perfect, but to make progress over time. And so if swimmers can get better at managing position in these drills, these activities, it's going to be easier for them to do when they're actually swimming. And once they have forward momentum, it's a lot easier to stay on the surface of the water, but they'll be able to do that with a lot less effort and a lot more precision if they can manage that skill, if they can learn that skill during these isolated floating activities. So again, the expectation is not that swimmers are going to be perfectly flat on the surface of the water with zero effort. However, they want to try to do that and they want to try to make progress towards that because that means that they're learning how to manage their position more effectively. So this is the inner tube float. You can see it's a compressed position. So the swimmer's going to bring their knees up to their chest. They're going to have their butt down towards the bottom of the pool, and they're going to be resting as passively as possible. And so the goal here is just to find a position that's relatively stable, trying to keep the knees up at the surface, trying to keep the feet up at the surface as well. And from that position, swimmers are going to try to transition into this position. So they're going to extend the arms overhead, you extend the legs straight, and as much as possible, they're trying to keep everything in a line at the surface of the water. And this is going to be very difficult for most swimmers, but if they can get a little bit better, they can maintain a little bit more position, they can maintain a little bit better posture, that's going to be a skill that they're going to be able to take with their regular backstroke swimming. And so again, like we just discussed, it's not about being perfectly aligned, it's trying to make progress, and that progress is going to translate into better alignment when they actually start swimming backstroke. Next up, we've got a couple kicking drills, specifically boat kick and elevator kick. And with boat kick, the goal here is to help swimmers learn how to get away from that arched back position and learn how to round their position a little bit more effectively. So they're going to place their hands across their hips. and they're going to round the upper back. That allows swimmers to kind of sit into the water, relax into the water, rather than having a really big chest and arching their back. And so the goal here is to feel that position in a simplified drill so that they can try to take that position into their backstroke swimming. Similarly, we're going to take elevator kick to help swimmers learn what position the head should be in to allow them to have the most effective, most streamlined position as they move through the water throughout the whole body. So what they're going to do is they're going to start off with a really high head position, a really low head position, and they're going to alternate between the two. And the goal here is to help them feel what's too high, what's too low, what's just right, what allows them to create the least amount of resistance due to the best alignment as they move through the water. And again, the goal here is to help them feel it so that they can take that same position, that same posture, that same alignment into their regular backstroke swimming. These kicking drills can be performed together. They can be performed separately. It's really up to you and about what you're trying to accomplish. At first, it could be useful for swimmers to do them together so that they can learn how to get out of that arch back position and learn how to adjust their head position at the same time. So this is boat kick, and as you can see here, his chest is depressed a little bit. He's got his shoulders up a little bit, and he's really trying to exaggerate the rounding of the back. So he's exaggerating the opposite of that arched back position. And so that's what we're really trying to accomplish here. It's not trying to mimic the perfect position that he wants to swim with. It's trying to help him feel the opposite of the tendency that swimmers have to arch so that they can feel what it's like to round and then try to build upon that and try to execute that with actual backstroke swimming. So you can do this where the head starts high and the head ends low, or you can have them start with the head low and end up with the head high. It's all about letting them feel that big range of head position and the corresponding range of body position. The more effectively swimmers can feel that, the more effective they're going to be at managing their position and finding the right position that they need to execute when swimming backstroke. Next up is elevator swim. And so we're going to take the same concept as elevator kick, and we're going to try to help swimmers feel what head position is going to allow for the best alignment. The goal is to let them feel it rather than have them practice the perfect alignment. So swimmers have different body structures, they have different body densities, so the right position is going to be different from swimmer to swimmer. It's difficult to predict, but if we give them the tools, we can help them discover the right position for them. So I like having them go from both high to low and low to high so that they can feel that change in sensation in multiple ways and allows them to explore in multiple ways, which again increases the chances that they're going to find the most effective way of moving through the water. So here, a swimmer's going to start with really high head position and then drive it down until it's really, really low, and that's going to help him feel what happens to his hip position, what happens to his head position, and how does that affect his overall alignment and the amount of resistance he creates as he moves through the water. So the more that we can help swimmers explore, the more we can help them find what position allows them to swim as easy as possible and to create as little resistance as possible. The more effective they can do that, the faster they're going to go. Next up is head up backstroke. And so for swimmers that are arching the back excessively, this can be a really effective strategy. By having swimmers look down towards the feet, the upper body tends to round without dropping the hips. So if swimmers are arched, that's going to round the spine out while still allowing them to keep the hips up at the surface. It's not about lifting the head up out of the water. It's more about looking down towards the feet or looking down towards the opposite side of the pool. And by doing so, swimmers can find a position that's going to be more effective. And so the most important thing is that subtlety is key here. Just by looking down a little bit, swimmers can get really positive changes in position, especially if they're arched in the back. And this drill, this strategy allows swimmers to figure out how much they need to look back, how much they need to look down in order to create a position that's more effective at creating speed. But what's important is that it's not sitting up in the water. It's just that swimmers need to look down towards their feet, look back. It's just the head moving a little bit, not lifting up out of the water. And that creates a situation where swimmers can learn to round things a little bit more effectively, which allows them to slide through the water more effectively. So as we can see here, the swimmer is looking back towards the camera here, and that's going to round his upper body, round his upper back a little bit, and that's going to allow him to feel what it's like to slide through the water without arching the back. And then all he has to do is settle the head back into the water after that, maintaining the same posture and the same position of his upper body, and that's going to allow him to get the best of both worlds, where the head's back down in line, and he's created a spinal position that allows him to just slide through the water. The next strategy is using training aids to help swimmers better feel the alignment that they're using as they move through the water and whether there's opportunities to improve that alignment to create less resistance. And so it's all about creating awareness and how much resistance is created during any skill development activity. So we can use fins to create more speed than normal, which is going to magnify the amount of drag that swimmers experience and that swimmers create. And the more that they create, the more that they'll be able to feel, and then they'll be able to change it. We can use different types of clothing that swimmers will wear on their body. And when they do, they're going to feel a ton of resistance as they move through the water on those specific parts. T-shirt, for example, they'll feel it across the upper body. If they wear shorts, they'll feel it across the hips. And by having more awareness, they're going to be able to create some change. Then when they take the equipment off, they're going to feel the water flowing over the previously covered parts of the body. And that awareness is going to also help them learn how to feel, how to slide through the water more effectively. Finally, they can use a weight belt, and that's going to pull their hips down out of position, out of alignment. Swimmers are going to have to work harder to maintain the alignment regardless of what they're doing. And they can feel the impact of poor alignment because the weight belt is going to make everything worse. And then when they take the weight belt off, it's going to be much easier to feel those positions and much easier to maintain those positions without the added resistance. So by using training aids, we can create a lot more awareness of how swimmers are moving through the water, the drag that they're creating as they move through the water, and that allows them the opportunity to change how they're swimming. And regardless of what skill development activities we're using, I find that using performance challenges almost always improves the impact. So you can have them use different speeds, different stroke counts, different stroke rates, or different combinations of the three in order to create challenges where, regardless of what they're doing, they need to do it at a higher level, at a better level. And so regardless of what activity they're doing, it's forcing them to swim differently. And the more we can force them to swim differently, the more they're going to have to explore, and the more they're going to have to explore how to create change, which is going to be critical for long-term improvement. And so we want to challenge the skill in different situations. So rather than just doing a simple activity such as elevator swim, we can do it at different speeds. We can do it at different stroke rates. We can have them descend. We can have them build. We can use all sorts of different strategies to further challenge that. It'll be novel. There'll be variety. And that's really important for building skills. And swimmers don't have to execute at a maximal effort level for it to be valuable. Just by having them do something different, by forcing them to create change, that's going to promote learning. And so by having someone descend, doesn't have to be descend to fast. It just has to be a change in speed, it means a change in input, and that means swimmers can swim differently. And with enough practice, they're going to swim better. This is a simple set to demonstrate how to apply all of these strategies. So they're going to go 2 rounds through this. They're going to go 650s. The odds are 25 boat kick plus 25 backstroke. The evens are 25 elevator kick plus 25 backstroke. And they're going to descend those in pairs. They're going to go a 10-second ball float before each repetition. So with the ball float, it's going to help them feel how the lungs are supporting them in the water and how that's going to help them manage their position. And on the kick efforts, the purpose of the boat kick is to help them feel how to maintain a better alignment with their spine, how to round that out just a little bit. And with the elevator kick, it's about finding the best head position to maintain as much horizontal alignment as possible. And swimmers are going to have the opportunity to try to apply whatever they learn, whatever they feel during the kicking efforts into the swimming efforts. And we're going to descend those 650s in pairs so that swimmers can be challenged to apply those skills at higher speeds, and it'll force them to execute and force them to explore at different speeds as well. The second half of it, we're going to use the same concept, but it's going to be a little bit more swim-based. So they're going to go 25 elevator swim plus 25 backstroke and 25 head-up backstroke plus 25 backstroke. They're also going to do a floating exercise before each of those repetitions, but this time it's going to be inner tube to straight back floats. They're going to learn to manage and maintain their alignment as they switch positions. As with the first set of 6, with those first 25s, it's going to help them explore, and then they're going to apply that with the regular backstroke on the second 25s. We're going to descend in pairs again, also so that swimmers can feel, they can learn how to apply these skills at different speeds, and it'll force them to execute those skills in slightly different ways. This next set, a little bit more of an endurance focus, and so they're going to go 250s, 2 100s, 2 150s, and then 2 200s. The first 25 is always going to be a strong effort. The odds are going to be with boat kick. The evens are going to be head-up backstroke. So in both cases, they're going to work on maintaining a little bit more rounded spinal position, and then they're going to try to execute that during the backstroke swims on the second half. The boat kick sets it up, and then with the head-up backstroke, it's going to be full stroke swimming, so they're going to do the same thing at a little bit higher level. And the effort is going to increase during the backstroke swim from steady to strong as the distance goes up. So swimmers are going to execute during that first 25, and they're going to try to maintain that throughout the rest of the set over the longer distances. So the focus here is to have constant reminders of the alignment, the position, the posture that we want, and then have swimmers try to execute and continue to execute that as the distances go up and as the effort goes up. Last set is more speed-based, so they're going to go 5 rounds through. They're going to go 4 25s. The first one is boat kick. The second one is elevator backstroke, where they go high position, low position, and then high position, and then a 25 head up backstroke and a 25 regular backstroke. So we're focusing on spinal position on that first 25, focus on head position on that second 25, a more advanced version of the spinal position on the third 25, and then regular backstroke at the end. So the challenge here is we're going to use different speed requirements and different training aids to help put these skills under more pressure, to help swimmers explore a little bit more, and to help them learn how to more effectively execute these skills at speed. So round one, they're going with a t-shirt. They're trying to minimize stroke count and time. Round two, they're going with fins. They're going to build the fast. Round three, there's no equipment, and they're going to go minimize stroke count and time. Round four is with a t-shirt again. They're going to build the fast now. Fins, minimize stroke count and time, and then no equipment but fast on the end. So we're putting a premium on speed here, and by using the t-shirts and the fins, we're going to allow them to better feel the amount of resistance that they're creating, and that's going to allow them to create change. And they're going to have to do that within the context of either trying to swim fast by building, or they're trying to swim fast by minimizing stroke count and time. So in every way, we're challenging the skills with the drills themselves and how they're executing those skills, and that's going to help promote change in a much more comprehensive way. One of the reasons butterfly is so difficult is because swimmers create so much resistance as they move through the water. They have to recover both arms over the water at the same time, and to do so, they have to lift the upper body, which is going to push down the lower body, which is going to create a ton of resistance as they go through the water. So if swimmers want to go fast, and if they want to make life easier for themselves, they've got to go through the water as level as possible, and that means improving their horizontal alignment. And if they can do so, they're going to go fast. We're going to talk all things horizontal alignment and butterfly. We're going to talk about why it matters, we're going to talk about what it is, and most importantly, we're going to talk about what to do about it. And as always, we'll keep it simple. Let's dive in. So why does it matter? Less resistance equals more speed. And the more vertical swimmers move through the water as they're swimming butterfly, the more resistance they create. The more horizontal swimmers move through the water as they're swimming butterfly, the less resistance they create. So if swimmers can have great horizontal alignment, that means they're going to be able to swim butterfly with less effort and more speed. And since those are two of the most important outcomes you could ever ask for, horizontal alignment is a pretty big deal. So helping swimmers learn how to really improve their horizontal alignment is going to be really important for helping them achieve their goals in butterfly. So what is horizontal alignment? As butterflyers swim, there's going to be a wave of undulation throughout the stroke. So that wave goes up to recover the arms. So swimmers have to lift their upper body, their chest, in order to get their arms up and over the water smoothly and effortlessly. Then the wave has to go back down so that the swimmer can get back into position to start the next stroke cycle. So that wave is going to go up and it's going to go down. And the smaller the amplitude of the wave, the more horizontal alignment there will be. And then the bigger the amplitude of the wave, the more resistance there's going to be, the less horizontal alignment there's going to be as swimmers move through the water. However, it's not necessarily about minimizing undulation, it's about optimizing undulation. There has to be enough undulation to get the arms up and over the surface of the water to recover them smoothly. And there also has to be sufficient undulation on the other side to get the body back into alignment after coming up out of the water to get the arms over the surface. So if swimmers use too much undulation, like I just showed you, there's going to be that big wave up and down, and that's going to create resistance. And if they use too little undulation, they're also going to create more resistance because they're not going to be able to effectively or smoothly recover the arms. They're going to either have to drag them through the water, or they're going to have to use a ton of effort to get them forwards, and that's going to cause more resistance as well. So it's all about finding the sweet spot so swimmers can recover the arms sufficiently, but not create too much resistance in order to do so. The more effectively swimmers can find the optimal amount of undulation for them, the faster they're going to swim. So let's cover those 2 points in a little bit more detail. So to recover the arms, the upper body does have to lift up and out of the water, or else the arms aren't going to be able to get out of the water. Most swimmers don't have the ability to move the arm well behind the body to get the arms over the surface, so they have to lift up in order to make that happen. The idea is once they lift enough to recover the arms over the water, they don't want to do more because that'll just raise them up unnecessarily, which is going to push the hips down unnecessarily, which is going to create more resistance. So they have to lift the upper body up out of the water to recover the arms, but they only want to do as much as they have to. On the flip side of that, breathing and recovering the arms necessarily causes lifting of the upper body, which is going to move the swimmer out of alignment. So swimmers have to get back into alignment after the breath, after the arm recovery, to minimize the resistance. And when the upper body goes up, the hips go down. So they have to find a way to get the hips back up into alignment after each breath and after each arm recovery. Here too, it's as much as necessary, as little as possible. We don't necessarily need to have the hips way up out of the surface, because in order to do that, they'll probably have to press their chest, which again is going to disrupt their horizontal alignment and create more resistance. So they have to get back into alignment after every stroke, but they don't want to overdo it where they're creating more resistance with really high hips and really low head and chest. So the big takeaway is as much as necessary, as little as possible. So if we watch this swimmer here at the beginning of the stroke cycle, you can see she's relatively level in the water. Now when she needs to breathe and recover the arms, you can see she's going to lose that alignment. She's going to be at an angle. And that's necessary for her to get the shoulders out of the water so she can recover the arms. And then afterwards, she's got to get back into alignment, and you can see the hips come back up to the surface. She presses the chest a little bit, but she's not diving excessively in order to do so. And like with the breath, it's as much as necessary, as little as possible. And then when she lifts to recover the arms, again, she's getting them out of the water, but she's not trying to go straight up. She's trying to do so with as little disruption of alignment as possible, and then getting back into position again after that breath, after the arm recoveries. So she's going to have to come up to recover the arms and to breathe, but she's trying to do so as little as possible. And then when she recovers the arms, she's trying to get back into alignment, but she's trying not to dive, trying not to exaggerate it in order to get into the best position as she can to start the next stroke cycle. So we take a look at another swimmer here. You can see at the beginning of the stroke cycle, good alignment here. And then as he comes through the pull, he's going to set up the arm recovery by lifting up out of the water. Again, he's not going vertical. He's trying to keep it as horizontal as possible. And then when he comes back, he needs to get back into alignment, get the hips back up right there. But again, he's got to press a little bit, but he's not diving down in order to make that happen. So minimizing how much he needs to rise up out of the water to recover the arms, and then minimizing what he needs to do to get back into alignment at the front of the stroke to set up the next stroke. So managing undulation and horizontal alignment is all about using as much range of motion as necessary, but as little as possible to keep resistance as low as possible to create as much speed as possible. So we'll take a look at one more swimmer here performing a 200 to demonstrate that the amount of undulation can change a little bit depending on how fast swimmers go, and also just depending on the swimmer. So this swimmer, you can see that there's a little bit more undulation here. She's coming up a little bit higher. She's pressing a little bit lower. And so you're going to get slightly different amounts of undulation based upon the event that swimmers are swimming, as well as their own individual characteristics. So a little bit more undulation than the previous two swimmers, partly because she's doing a 200 and she's probably just a different athlete as well. However, the same principles apply, trying to create as much undulation as necessary and as little as possible. Before we get into solutions, what are some of the challenges with improving horizontal alignment in butterfly? I just alluded to it in the videos, but different swimmers swimming at different speeds are going to have to use different amounts of undulation. There's no one solution that applies to all swimmers in all situations. If swimmers are going a little faster, they're going to have to tighten things up because they don't have as much time to go through full undulation cycles. And if they're swimming at 200, they can maybe get away with it more because the stroke rate is going to be a little bit slower. More importantly, different swimmers are going to need to use different amounts of undulation to optimize their alignment. If swimmers have really flexible shoulders, they may be able to stay lower in the water, not have to raise as high, and still recover the arms smoothly. If swimmers are really inflexible, they're probably going to have to come up more to give themselves enough space to get the arms over the surface. So another example is if swimmers have really long and dense legs, they're going to have to work harder to get the hips back up after each stroke cycle than the swimmer who has much shorter legs and much less dense legs. That's just one example of how different body proportions can affect the amount of undulation. The point isn't that you need to know all those different factors, it's that you can't necessarily know those factors, and that makes it hard to prescribe exactly what amount of undulation a given swimmer should use. Another challenge is that the skill of optimizing horizontal alignment is more about removing unnecessary movements rather than adding movements. We often think about what we have to do, but sometimes it's thinking about what we don't have to do that's really important, and that can be a different shift for a lot of swimmers and coaches alike. Telling a swimmer to stay level or to swim flat doesn't work nearly as well as telling the swimmer to bend their arm at a certain degree. It's much more difficult for swimmers to conceptualize. Finally, small changes can add up. So small mistakes in alignment can lead to big losses in speed. And a lot of these changes aren't necessarily obvious for coaches to see, and they have to be felt by swimmers so that they can make the adjustments, they can make the changes that are going to help them swim faster. And to help them become more aware of what's happening, that's a different approach than simply telling them what to do. So now let's talk solutions. We're going to go over 4 drills that can be really effective at helping swimmers feel these key skills and also feel what it's like when they're not executing these key skills. And then we're going to go over 2 strategies that you can use regardless of what activities you're doing to help further enhance learning and really accelerate their progress. You want to have multiple really effective solutions because sometimes one thing will work for one swimmer and it won't work for another. By having multiple options, you're more likely to reach more of the swimmers and create a positive change in more of the swimmers. First activity we're going to talk about is the ball float to X float. And so swimmers are going to be in a ball, they're going to be floating on the surface of the water, and then they're going to expand everything out, making an X with the arms and the legs. And so this allows swimmers to feel the support of their lungs, and they can use the flotation to stay aligned. And they also learn how to lean into the lungs to support the hip. So a huge part of horizontal alignment is getting back into alignment after the stroke, learning to press the chest, learning how to control posture and position by leaning into the lungs. And so swimmers are going to have to take the pressure off the lungs in order to breathe and recover the arms effectively. Then they're going to need to put the pressure back on the lungs in order to get back into alignment. The better they can feel the lungs, the more aware they are of the lungs, the easier it's going to be to execute these skills. Another key benefit of this skill is swimmers learn how to hold tension in the legs to keep the legs up at the surface, and that's a key aspect of moving through the water horizontally. Finally, because swimmers are moving dynamically during this drill, it allows them to learn how to manage position, control position while moving the limbs in space, which is very different than trying to control position statically. So here's what it looks like. Swimmers are going to be at a ball. That'll allow them to float on the surface, and then they slowly extend the arms out at an angle as well as the legs out at an angle. And you can have swimmers do this with different positions. You can have them go wide. You can have them go narrow. You can have them move the arms really, really slow. You can have them move the arms and legs really, really fast. You can challenge them in different ways. The idea here is that they learn how to create pressure into the water to maintain as an effective position as they can. And the better they get, the more skilled they'll be at managing the horizontal alignment in butterfly as well as the other strokes. Second activity is one-arm butterfly. I really like this activity because it allows for the same essential rhythm of butterfly, but it does so in a simplified version, which makes it easier for swimmers to control their skills. They get more repetition and they have more control over those repetitions. So what this is really effective for is helping swimmers understand the up and down nature of the stroke and how to control that up and down nature to, 1, make sure it's sufficient to recover the arms, but 2, it's small enough that minimizes the amount of resistance that's created. It's really useful for helping swimmers feel how the kick drives the rhythm of the stroke and how they can use the kick to keep everything in line, especially getting back into alignment at the end of the stroke cycle. It's much easier for swimmers to feel in one-arm butterfly versus full stroke butterfly. It's easier to perform, and when they have that basic rhythm, they have that basic timing, it's much easier to transition into regular full stroke butterfly because it's the same basic timing. They're just going to have to use both arms simultaneously in full stroke butterfly. So here's what it looks like in action. You can see he's got to come up to get the arm out of the water, and he's also got to get the hips back up at the end of the stroke cycle to get everything back into alignment. So he's got the same basic rhythm as regular butterfly, the same undulation rhythm, and he can work on the magnitude of that undulation in a much simpler context, which is ultimately going to improve his skills in full stroke butterfly. Next up is fly with flutter kick. So it's really effective for helping swimmers learn to control their undulation. You take the dolphin kick out, you reduce the up and down motion that's created by the dolphin kick, and it encourages swimmers to stay more level, and it encourages them to minimize the amount of resistance that they create. So for swimmers that have a ton of undulation, this can be really effective. And even in swimmers that don't have a ton of undulation, it can be useful for helping them understand how to move through the water with even less resistance. There's 2 different ways you can do this. You can either do it with one-arm butterfly or you can do it with two-arm butterfly. The one arm is going to be less specific, obviously, not having to recover both arms at the same time. However, the benefit is that it's lower intensity and you can usually do more repetitions. In contrast, the double arm version is a lot more specific. It's probably more useful for helping swimmers learn, but it's a lot harder, it's higher intensity, and that means you can get less repetitions. So they're both really useful. It just depends on the context in terms of which one is going to be more appropriate for your situation. So we'll start with the one-arm version here. As you can see, there's still going to be a little bit of undulation. He's got to do that to get the arms out of the water. However, it's a lot flatter as compared to one-arm version with dolphin kick. And so for swimmers that are undulating a lot, this can be really useful for helping to flatten things out and promote a more effective horizontal alignment as the swimmer moves through the water. Here we have butterfly with flutter kick, and again, there's still going to be some undulation, but it's a lot more level than when he's swimming regular butterfly. He's going to be moving through the water with less up and down motion. It's going to be more horizontal, and for swimmers that have a lot of undulation in the stroke, this can be really useful for helping them to learn how to stay more level and create less resistance in their butterfly. Our last drill, we're going to use head-up butterfly, which can exaggerate the loss of alignment as swimmers move through the water. And so that exaggeration, that contrast can help them better feel effective alignment when they're swimming with the head back down. And so it's that contrast that can be really useful for learning to exaggerate and amplify the effects of poor position. And when swimmers are swimming with the head up, they can really feel poor hip position, and that means they're going to be better able to feel effective position when the head is back down. By creating better sensory awareness, they're more likely to better execute the skills when they need to. Head-up butterfly also exaggerates the kicking action. Swimmers have to kick harder to stay up, and they have to time the kick more effectively to stay up as well. And since the kick is effective for keeping the hips up at the surface of the water, if swimmers aren't executing their kicks effectively or at the right time, they're really going to struggle with their alignment, and so this drill can help reinforce the kick and reinforce the effectiveness of it as well as the timing. So if we watch here, he's going to have a much more inclined position throughout the whole stroke. And as you can see, he's going to have to kick hard in order to keep his hips up throughout the entire stroke cycle. So this is a great way to exaggerate a loss of alignment as well as reinforce the effectiveness and the importance of the kick in order to maintain great alignment. So with one drill, we're accomplishing two really important objectives. In order to better improve horizontal alignment, we can make the drills we just discussed and regular butterfly even more effective at improving horizontal alignment by using resistance. While resistance is typically used to improve propulsion, I found that it can be really effective for improving horizontal alignment as well. It does so for two reasons. First, it increases the challenge. Resistance typically pulls swimmers out of position, and that makes it much more difficult to maintain alignment, and that means they're going to have to work even harder to make it happen. By being challenged, by working harder, that's actually going to improve their skills. And once they take the resistance off, it's going to be a lot easier for them to execute correctly, and they're going to be able to execute even more effectively. So resistance is a really powerful learning tool precisely because it makes it more difficult to swim really well and to maintain great alignment. It's also really effective for increasing awareness. Swimmers can better perceive how they're moving through the water. The resistance slows things down a little bit, and the added resistance makes it a little bit easier for swimmers to feel what's happening so they can better feel their alignment, they can better feel their position, and like we talked about earlier, a lot of these mistakes are pretty small in magnitude. The more awareness swimmers have, the more they can feel what's happening, the more effective they're going to be at changing things that you as a coach may otherwise not be aware of or not be able to see. So we're helping swimmers improve their ability to detect mistakes and to fix them. So when it comes to alignment and resistance, different types of resistance have a little bit different impact. Parachute will tend to pull the hips down. The drag socks make it more difficult for swimmers to kick, which is going to necessarily let the hips come down more. A weight belt is going to pull the hips down as well because it's going to literally weigh them down. And it also creates more awareness of the hip movement because there's going to be all that extra mass at the hips. So when the hips move during the normal course of undulation, swimmers are going to be able to better feel that. They're going to be more aware of that. Finally, swimmers can wear shorts too, and that's also going to pull the hips down because of that added drag. And that added drag is going to further increase awareness of the hips because swimmers are going to feel them move more because they're going to feel the resistance as the hips move through the water with the shorts on. So these different types of resistance increase the challenge, and they help swimmers become more aware of how they're moving through the water, how effectively they're moving through the water, and when they're making mistakes. Regardless of the drills that I'm using or whether I'm swimming full stroke butterfly, I'm typically always asking for performance at some level using either stroke counts, stroke rates, or speed. So there's two different ways you can do this. You can have them do the drills, the sensory activities, and then perform. So they'll do 425s with one arm butterfly and then 425s butterfly, minimize stroke count and time. So the first 425s help them feel what's happening, have them more aware of how they're moving through the water and how they're executing horizontal alignment. And then they try to apply that during the 425s butterfly, or you can have them perform during both. So let's say they're doing 425s, one arm butterfly with drag socks, minimize stroke count and time. So now they got the resistance, they're doing the drill, but they have to execute speed and length at the same time. And then they're going into the 425s butterfly, minimize stroke count and time. Both strategies are effective. You can use either one or you can use both. Regardless, by asking swimmers to perform, you're going to encourage them to swim differently. And by using drills with specific purpose and then adding resistance if necessary or desired, you can encourage them to swim in different ways that lead to better alignment. Asking for performance is a great way to turbocharge change because it requires swimmers to swim differently. Having discussed the different solutions, let's see what they look like in practice with some specific sets. This set is a little bit more of a skill set, so we're going to go 3 rounds through. We're going to go 825s and then 625s. The 825s are one-arm butterfly. The odds are with the left arm. The evens are with the right. They're going to alternate between 2 flutter kick and 2 dolphin kick. So the first 2, they're going to be a little bit more level. Then they're going to try to maintain that same alignment while integrating the dolphin kick. The second 4 are going to be faster at the same stroke count as the first 4. And so they're going to have to create more speed without giving up any efficiency. Then they're going to go 625s butterfly. The odds are flutter kick. The evens are with dolphin kick. So same idea, a little bit more level on the odds, and then getting back into a butterfly rhythm on the evens. They're going to descend 1 to 3 in pairs at the same stroke count. So they can't take more strokes, but they got to find more speed. And before each of these repetitions, they're going to perform 3 ball float to X floats. And the purpose there is to help them feel how to be more aligned, how to use the lungs in order to stay in alignment as they move through the water. Second rounds with shorts to just create a little bit extra resistance around the hips so swimmers can better feel how they're moving through the water. And then they'll take the shorts off for the last round so they can take what they learned during the shorts work and apply that to regular butterfly swimming. So a simple way to help them become more aware of how they're moving through the water and the impact of their alignment. Next set here is a little bit more of an endurance focus, so they're going to go 450s and then 1225s. They'll repeat that for 3 rounds. The same basic pattern for each round, however, they're going to do something a little bit different each round. So they're always going to go 450s, one-arm butterfly, 25 left, 25 right. That's just to help them groove that skill. Then they're going to go 4 rounds of 325s. The first one is butterfly with flutter kick, really helps swimmers stay level. The next one, they're going to go 4 cycles of head up butterfly and then no breath into the wall to get the contrast between a really high head position and a really low head position and how that impacts alignment. Then they're going to go 25 butterfly to finish. In round 1, they're going to descend the 450s 1 to 4, and the 425s are going to descend those 1 to 4 by round. In round 2, they're going to build to strong on all 450s and all the 25s. And then in the last round, they're going to minimize stroke count and time for all the repetitions. So we're using different drills to help swimmers feel these skills. They're also adding speed on all 3 rounds and length on the last round in order to challenge swimmers to execute their skills differently, execute the drills differently, and then put it all together with regular butterfly. So a solid way to get a decent amount of volume in with a really great skill focus to help swimmers improve their fitness and improve their horizontal alignment. Next set is more of a speed set to work on these skills at faster speeds. They're going to go 3 rounds through. They're going to go 8 cycles of head up butterfly fast. Then they're going to go 25 butterfly with flutter kick, minimize stroke count and time, and then a 25 butterfly, minimize stroke count and time. They'll repeat that 3 times and then go 25 butterfly fast. They're going to repeat the whole thing 3 times. On the first round, those first 9 efforts are with a parachute. The second round, they're with drag socks. The third round, they're going to be with shorts or a weight belt. So we're challenging swimmers to execute these skills against the resistance at pretty high speeds while still being efficient. So they're going to have to find ways to optimize their alignment, to optimize their undulation to create as much speed as they can and as much length as they can at the same time. And with a set like this, we'll give them a little bit more rest, ask for more speed, ask for more length to really challenge them to perform and execute these skills at high speeds. Ultimately, swimmers have to be able to swim well when swimming fast, and that's what a set like this is geared towards improving. Horizontal alignment in butterfly is a really critical skill for fast swimming. We've just gone through several different ways to help swimmers learn that skill, as well as sets to put that into practice. If your swimmers aren't getting the job done underwater, it becomes more and more difficult for them to win races and for them to go fast. And while most people will focus on how much propulsion is being created during underwater kicking, in many cases, the key to fast underwater kicking is optimizing alignment to minimize resistance. It's more about taking away the brakes as opposed to adding more gas. So we're going to cover why minimizing resistance is so important. We're going to cover the key skills that swimmers need to be able to achieve and execute in order to minimize resistance. We're going to talk about the challenges of helping swimmers learn this important skill, and we'll go through solutions that you can use to help swimmers develop this key skill so that they can go faster underwater. Finally, I'll show you a couple sets that you can use as starting points to implement some of these ideas. Let's check it out. So why does minimizing resistance matter? Well, speed in all the strokes, and certainly with underwater kicking, comes down to propulsion and resistance. When propulsion is a lot more than resistance, you get speed. And so if swimmers are creating a ton of resistance and very little propulsion, they're not going to go anywhere. But if they're creating a lot of propulsion and they're creating not very much resistance, they're going to go fast. And so if you want to help swimmers go fast, you have two options. You can help them learn to create more propulsion, or you can help them learn to create less resistance. So resistance is half the equation when it comes to speed. Unfortunately, most of the focus is on learning how to get more propulsion from the kick, focusing on the kick itself, rather than the body shape, the body vessel that's traveling through the water. And the reality is swimmers can't go fast when the brakes are on. And so if they're creating a ton of resistance, it doesn't matter how much propulsion they create, they're not going to go fast. The other aspect, and the much less appreciated aspect of minimizing resistance, is that to create more and more propulsion, it requires more and more energy. So swimmers have to be fitter and fitter and fitter in order to execute more and more propulsive kicks and sustain those kicks over the course of a race. In contrast, eliminating resistance will increase their speed, but not only does it not cost more energy in order to execute these skills, it actually costs less. So underwater kicking speed that's a result of minimizing resistance actually improves endurance because it's simply easier to execute those skills for longer periods of time. And as I'm sure you've seen in races, it's not just what happens on the first wall, it's what happens on the last wall that's really matters. And some of that is fitness, but if you can just have swimmers use less energy to create speed, their fitness is necessarily going to improve even if their metabolic fitness hasn't got better. Their ability to execute skills for longer periods of time will improve, and that's another really important aspect of why minimizing resistance during underwater kicking is so important. So what is it? Well, it's all about optimizing amplitude. So when swimmers have a bigger and bigger kick, a bigger and bigger range of motion of the body, they're going to create more propulsion and they're going to create more resistance. In the opposite respect, the less amplitude they create, the less resistance they'll create and the less propulsion they'll create. So swimmers have to find the sweet spot, which maximizes the amount of propulsion they create and minimizes the amount of resistance they create. And that's going to be a little bit different for each swimmer. At lower amplitude levels, when the swimmer expands the amplitude a little bit, they tend to create more propulsion than they do resistance. However, at a certain point, they start getting less and less propulsion and more resistance. So there again is going to be that sweet spot where they create as much propulsion as possible and as little resistance as possible. And that's what they need to use in order to create as much speed as possible. So minimizing resistance is ultimately about having an optimized amplitude. The second key skill is keeping the spine straight. And so the shape of the vessel, which is really dictated by the spine, is going to determine the speed of the vessel. If the spine is kind of rounded or it's really arched, it's like putting on the brakes. You want swimmers to be going through the water as straight as possible, and the straighter they can stay, the straighter they can swim, the less resistance they're going to create. And obviously they're going to be undulating around that straightness, but if they're trying to undulate around a position like this or a position like that, it's going to create a lot more resistance. So the straighter they can be, the straighter the baseline they can be, the less resistance they create, the more speed they create. Another key aspect is that we want the range of motion through the torso to be relatively controlled because that's going to minimize the amount of resistance they have. But if swimmers can still use a relatively large amplitude through their kick, that means they can create a lot of propulsion without creating a ton of drag, a ton of resistance. So if swimmers can learn to move the legs through a proportionally larger range of motion than they do the spine, they're going to optimize the amount of propulsion they create and minimize the amount of resistance they create. Again, the optimized amplitude is going to be a little bit different for each swimmer, but in both cases, we want a bigger amplitude with the legs than there is with the body, and that's going to create more propulsion with less resistance. So if we watch this swimmer here, the first thing to notice is look how relatively straight his spine is. There's not a big curve in either direction. It's pretty much straight from hands to hips, and you can see that's a really straight line, which is going to create a lot less resistance. The other aspect of it too is there's not a whole lot of range of motion through the torso and the spine, but look how much range of motion he's getting through the legs. He's kicking way in front of the body, and that's going to allow him to create more propulsion with less resistance. So this swimmer in particular has a relatively tight amplitude, especially with the upper body, and he's got a pretty big amplitude with the lower body, and that's what we're looking for. And he's keeping the spine really straight, which is also really important. So this swimmer here has a little bit more range of motion. There's a little bit more amplitude to the kick. However, if we watch the spinal action, the spinal movement, you can see his spine's still pretty straight. He doesn't have a huge arch. He doesn't have a huge curve. He's keeping things pretty straight, even though the upper body is moving more. And the same thing too with the legs. You can see that they're moving through a really big range of motion relative to the upper body. So again, even though this swimmer is using more amplitude, more range of motion, he's still keeping the spine straight, and the legs are moving more than the upper body. So he's going to get more out of the kick while still minimizing the resistance that he creates with the upper body. So with those two swimmers, you see the same principles demonstrated, even though they do so in a slightly different way, with one swimmer keeping a tighter amplitude, another swimmer having a more open amplitude, but in both cases, relatively straight spine, and the legs are moving through a much larger range of motion than the upper body does. So why doesn't every swimmer have unbelievable underwaters? Why is it difficult to help swimmers learn this key skill? Well, the first challenge is what's optimal. As we just saw, two really good underwater kickers have different amplitudes, have different ranges of motion, and so how do we know which one's going to be better? Swimmers have different structures, they have different joint ranges of motion, and that's going to really dictate how much amplitude they should use in order to have the most speed, in order to minimize resistance and maximize propulsion. So optimal is going to vary pretty widely across individuals. And again, how do you know what's going to be best for each one person? Second, underwater kicking happens fast. The cycle rate is a lot faster than all the other strokes, and so the movements are happening really fast, and so it's really difficult for swimmers to think their way through things. They have to be able to just kind of do it. And so if swimmers can't figure it out, they can't feel it, it's going to be really tough for them to think their way through it, because as soon as they start to think about whatever they're trying to execute, it's already too late. What needs to happen has already happened, and they're not going to be able to make the adjustment that they want. And so because of the fast speeds, it becomes more and more difficult to execute these skills. Lastly, it's a very subtle skill. Minimizing resistance is all about slight changes in posture and slight changes in amplitude, and it's very difficult to see, and it can be difficult for the swimmers to feel, and even small changes can lead to really big differences in terms of what happens. So if swimmers can't see it, you can't feel it, and it's hard to explain, we're going to have a challenge in terms of helping swimmers develop these skills. And so what it really comes down to is swimmers have to be able to feel the skills, they have to be aware of the skills, and as coaches, we have to provide them with the opportunities to actually develop the ability to feel what they're doing and then start to make those changes. So we talked about why minimizing resistance underwater is so important. We've talked about what it looks like. We've talked about the skills that swimmers have to execute. We've seen what it looks like, and we've talked about why it's difficult to help swimmers develop this skill. So now let's talk solutions. We're going to go over 2 drills that you can use to help swimmers become more aware of the resistance that they're creating. And then we're going to go over 2 training strategies that can further help swimmers learn how to feel, what to feel, and become more aware of what they're doing and whether they're executing those skills in ways that create speed. So let's check it out. The first strategy is amplitude manipulations. So what you're going to do is have swimmers explore lots of different ranges of motion with their kick. The more they explore, the more likely it is they're going to figure out what works for them. Again, because of the individual differences, it's really difficult to know exactly what a swimmer should do, exactly how much amplitude they should use. So we have to give them the opportunity to figure it out for themselves. If we use really big kicks, we use really small kicks, we transition from high amplitude to low amplitude, from low amplitude to high amplitude within the same repetition. We let them explore it in lots of different ways. They're going to start to pick up on what creates speed, what creates a lot of resistance, what creates a lot of propulsion, and what works. Again, if we can't know what the best solution is, we have to provide them with the opportunity to figure it out for themselves. And you can use tons of different variations. You can use different training aids like fins, like drag socks. You can have them do it at different speeds, at different kick rates. You can have them explore different amplitudes with any type of underwater kicking drill, whether that's a kick on the wall, whether that's vertical kicking, where it's just straight up underwater kicking. You can also have them play with different positions, whether kicking on their side, on their front, or on their back. They're all really great ways to help swimmers explore. The more they can explore, the more they can figure out what consistently leads to faster and easier swimming, the more likely it is they're going to figure out what to do and how to make that happen. So here are a couple examples. This swimmer's starting off with a really big kick, and he's going to gradually try to keep things tighter and really make things smaller. And so this is an example where you can help swimmers feel what happens when they move from a big kick to a small kick. How does that change how much resistance they can create? How does that change how much propulsion they can create? And what's the balance between the two that ultimately leads to speed? And then the flip side here is they're starting really big, and then they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And again, it's the same idea, it's just a different context. And so what's really important is that you can do it in lots of different variations. This swimmer's on the side, he's using fins, he's got his arms in streamline. You can have him do it lots of different ways. You can use fins, you can not use fins, on the stomach, on the back. You can go from low to high, from high to low. You can go all low and then alternate with all high. There's tons of different options. It's the principle that's really important, is you're helping them feel big kicks, small kicks, and then what creates the most speed for the least amount of effort. The next option is to alter the streamline. So if we can create more resistance, we can help swimmers better feel the resistance. And so they're going to have that contrast between having a streamline and not having a streamline. They're going to feel all that resistance flowing over their body. And so you can have swimmers go with their arms across the chest. You can have the swimmers go with their hands behind the head. And in both cases, they're going to feel a ton of resistance across their head, across their shoulders, over their stomach, over their back. And that's going to help them become more aware of how they're sliding through the water, particularly when they alternate between using an altered streamline and a regular streamline. Another benefit is that the streamline itself tends to dampen the amplitude. It tends to help swimmers control the amplitude, and it's going to be a lot more difficult to control that amplitude without the arms and streamline, but that means they have more control over what they do when they add it back in. And again, that contrast is really valuable for helping swimmers feel and figure out how to manipulate their undulation, how to manipulate the amplitude of the undulation, and how to control that with their upper body. And that's really what tends to dictate how much amplitude they use. So if they can better control that, they can better feel that, they're going to be more equipped to find an optimal amount of undulation, an optimal amount of amplitude that allows them to minimize the resistance they create while still creating a ton of propulsion. So here we have a swimmer, arms crossed behind the head, and he's going to have to control the amplitude. He's also going to create a ton of resistance. You can just see how much resistance is going to be smacking into his forearms, smacking into his head. And then when he goes back to regular underwater kicking, he's going to have more control over the amplitude. He'll have the ability to make it bigger or smaller depending on what he's feeling. And he's going to be much more aware of the resistance that he's creating, because now he's going to feel like he's just slipping through, and that's going to feel a lot different. Whereas if he hadn't done the extra resistance before, it would just feel normal to him. Same here with the arms across the chest. He's going to have even less control over the amplitude that he has. He's going to feel even more resistance, and so it's an even better strategy when you're looking for really great contrast to create a ton of resistance and really help them learn how to control their amplitude, the range of motion that they create in order to create speed. So as we talked about before, a huge part of helping swimmers learn to minimize resistance is helping them feel the amount of resistance that they're creating as they move through the water. Unfortunately, regular underwater kicking isn't particularly effective at that. One, because swimmers have done it so many times, but two, there's just not a whole lot of resistance. And so for swimmers to become more aware, using training aids is a really powerful tool. And we've got three options here. One, we can go over speed, which is usually fins, but can also be done with a cord. We've got clothing, which can be t-shirts or shorts, whatever else you can think of having swimmers wear. And then lastly is a weight belt. And so with overspeed, the extra speed means that there's going to be more drag, which means swimmers are going to be better able to feel the resistance that they're creating. And for instance, if we use that with the exercises that we just talked about, having the arms across the chest or behind the head, then they're going to feel even more resistance because they're going so much faster and they're using the fins. Clothing can also be really useful because swimmers are going to be much more aware of the drag that's being created as they move through the water when they're wearing a t-shirt, for instance, and they can feel that resistance and they can feel the impact of their amplitude. But then when they take it off, now all of a sudden all that water is going to be flowing over their body, which wasn't previously. It's going to be flowing over their skin specifically, and they're going to be a lot more aware of what's actually happening. And if they're more aware, they can start to make some subtle adjustments. They can start to manipulate their amplitude, control their spine to minimize the amount of resistance that they're creating. And so if the resistance they feel is at a level 9, if they can get it down to a level 8, that's going to be a pretty big improvement. And so it's just about being aware and feeling these skills, and then they can start to change them. Lastly, a weight belt, having all the resistance on the hips, is going to help swimmers better feel how the hips are moving through the water, the resistance that they're creating, and it's going to help them learn to control the movement of the torso, which again, as we talked about earlier, having that relatively controlled torso is important to minimizing resistance and still allowing for a lot of propulsion with that bigger leg kick. Finally, performance is a great way to help facilitate change. So by using different kick rates and using different speeds, we can challenge swimmers to perform using any of the previous strategies. So the drills themselves, the training aids, and combining them in different ways, and then asking for performance is going to help them learn and force them to search for better solutions. They have to find speed, but they have to do so in the context of those different activities. You can then increase the challenge by asking for them to create speed at different kick rates. It's going to be harder to create speed at low rates, and some swimmers, it's going to be hard for them to execute great skills at fast rates. And so challenge them at both ends of the spectrum is really great and really effective for helping them learn these skills. You can also have them try to go as far as possible for, say, 10 kicks at a given rate. And so they can't slow the kick down to get more distance. They have to kick better at the same rate to get further with those, for instance, 10 kicks. Again, a really great performance challenge that when performed with those other activities is really going to force them and encourage them to search for new solutions. What's great about performance is that it gives swimmers something to calibrate with It gives them a concrete goal to try to achieve, and it lets them know what works and what doesn't. If they use one strategy and they go 12 seconds for a 25, and they use another strategy and they go 11 seconds, and that happens over and over and over again, that provides them with some pretty good clues as to what works and what they should do if they want to kick fast underwater. And because they're using activities that necessarily stress the amount of resistance that they create, they're going to start to figure out solutions that require less resistance and allow them to go faster underwater. So here's a skill-based set to help swimmers improve their underwater kicking. They're going to go 4 rounds through. They're going to go 425s underwater kick with fins. They're going to go odds, low to high amplitude, evens, high to low amplitudes. They're going to explore really big ranges of motion, and they want to try to get as big as they can on the high and as tight as they can on the low. Then they're going to go 412.5s underwater kick, build a strong, the odds, arms across the chest, evens across behind the head, and that's going to challenge them to create stability, to minimize resistance as they go, and they're adding speed to that as well. 50 swim choice, 12.5 strong underwater each wall. They're going to descend 1 to 4 on the swim. The underwater stays strong throughout. It gives them a chance to put it together, see if they can make it happen when they swim. For round 1, they're going to wear a t-shirt on the 25s and the 12.5s, and that's going to create more resistance, help them really feel what they're doing. Same thing with shorts on round 2 and weight belt on round 3, and then they're just going to try to put it all together on round 4. So they're exploring different ranges of motion. They're using different streamlined positions to help them learn to control the range of motion and feel the resistance, and we're using the different types of training aids to help them become more aware of the resistance as well. So really challenging them in a lot of different ways to help them feel how much resistance they're creating and ultimately try to change that. Next set, a little bit more of an endurance feel. So they're going to set up each round with 425s underwater kick with fins and a t-shirt. They're going to descend 1 to 4 to fast at the same kick rate. So we'll start off at 0.75 seconds per cycle, drop it down to 6.5, 5.5, 4.5. 7.5 is not particularly fast. 4.5 is pretty fast. So what they have to do is they have to find a way to create speed without picking up the rate. And that's the real challenge, and it becomes more difficult to do that when the rate is already really fast. Then they're going to go into some longer swimming where they try to execute really great kicks, have really great alignment, and by using the fins and the t-shirt, they're going to be going really fast because of the fins, and they're going to get all that sensation, all that awareness of the resistance because of the t-shirt. And then when they take those off, they should feel like they're just sliding through the water when they do the next piece. And so the next piece, they're going to go 300, 2 150s, 3 100, 650s. They're going to go 4 strong kicks each wall, and then 5, 6, 7 as they drop the distances down, and the overall time needs to get faster as they go. So there's more and more emphasis on the kick, and they're trying to be better and better on those 25s and then carry those skills, whatever they learn, whatever they figure out, into the longer swimming and apply those great kicks while they're actually swimming. This last set is geared more towards creating speed underwater. They're going to go 6 rounds through. They're going to go 12 underwater kicks with the arms crossed behind the head. They're trying to get as far as possible at 6.0 seconds per cycle. So they can't move the feet slower to create more distance, so they got to create as much distance as they can at the same kick rate. The challenge with that is they got to get more out of each kick, and they got to do so with the arms crossed behind the head. Then we're going to do the same thing with the arms across the chest. Then they're going to do the same thing with regular dolphin kicking, and then they're going to go 25 fast with 15 meters underwater off each wall. So the first round, they're wearing either t-shirt and shorts, so they're going to get extra resistance on the body, no equipment on round 2, and that's going to continue that pattern. So the odd rounds are with extra resistance on the body, and then the even rounds are without equipment. And then the kick rate's going to drop from 6.0 to 5.0 to 4.0. That's going to make it a lot more difficult to get kick length. However, swimmers are going to have to execute those skills at really high rates if they want to go fast underwater. So they got to figure out how to minimize resistance, create as much length as possible, even at really high kick rates. If they can do that, they're going to swim fast underwater. So we're challenging the skills with performance, we're challenging the skills with resistance, and we're challenging the skills with different drills that require them to be really good with controlling their amplitude and minimizing the resistance they create as they move through the water. And each round we give them a chance to put it all together with some fast underwater kicking, both on its own and transitioning to really fast swimming.